Hi everyone. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Barry Cranford. I'm one of the organisers of the London CTOs. I'm not a CTO myself. I run a recruitment business, tech recruitment business called RecWorks. So I've personally been on a mission for about the last 12 years or so to try and prove that recruitment can be a force of good in the industry. So the London CTOs is a good example of that. We've run close to 100 events now. But my personal passion in the whole thing is around the mentoring aspects of it all. So in fact, one of the things that really kicked off my motivation with the London CTOs was when I was out meeting a first-time CTO, and he was quite honest about how overwhelming the whole situation was. So we managed to put him with a couple of other more experienced CTOs, and they mentored him, and it ended up having this huge impact. So this core idea of using our network and our reach to bring people together so that everyone can learn, that's really at the heart of what we do here. So yeah, and that's really what today's about. So I think we've got something like 10 people that signed up to say that they were happy to mentor or share their stories, and a load of more junior CTOs that wanted to listen. So yeah, so without further ado, I'll ask my first question. And let me just admit a few more people before I do. Okay, so does any of the people that signed up to be a mentor, does anyone have a story of when they have been in a position, when you have been in a position where you had limited budget or resources, in which you either did or didn't take your projects to completion? I'd be interested to hear what happened, how you got through it, and what you learned. So do we have anyone happy to share a story there? Yeah, Pedro.
Wait, to be honest, I don't know if I signed it to be a mentor. I can't remember. Maybe yes, probably yes. But you know, I'm from Spain, and we don't have there as much financial support than we have here. So everything is going like 60% of what you guys have here, or we have now in London. So I used to have a lot of clients with a really financially struggling. They were like, okay, I have 12K, 15K to create a prototype. Well, to be honest, if I have to take the margin from the development company, it will be impossible. So when I have a financial situation where there is really shortage of money, what I do is I just, let's say, buy hours. I don't buy a product. I buy hours from the developers. So I organize the project myself. I say, okay, we have to develop an app or a backend, or I have to create this SEO strategy or whatever. I estimate the hours, and I just buy this amount of hours. Then I explain to my client, then there will be no warranty with this hour because they are buying just developer time. And I also create, let's say, a list of the functionalities. I receive the functionality from my client and say, okay, you need these 100 items. And then explain them, okay, I'm sure that I will give you 50 of those 100. Probably I will give you 75. And if we are lucky, we will get those 100. So I try to explain to my client that things will happen and we won't get, probably we won't get what we want to have, okay? But I explain them that for sure I will give a piece, and we have to put everything there. So every time I have to work with a client with not a lot of money, and this mainly what I have been doing for the last 4 or 5 years, I explain that probably they won't get what they have in mind. Okay, that's the main key, and tell them to accept that they will get only one part of what they are expecting, and also the warranties. Say you have to avoid every cost. I mean, just you have to get what you pay for and nothing more. Sometimes it's just about explaining to your client or to your team that the resources are limited. That's more or less what I do.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pedro. Do anyone have any questions on anything that Pedro just said? Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, hi Pedro, thanks for sharing. Just in terms of how you were managing your development, did you form like a Moscow list of things that developers must do, should deliver, and could deliver, and then maybe arrange your risk in terms of delivery based on that?
Yes, I mean, that's part of managing the team. It depends on the team that I'm managing, because if it's a senior, I just talk to him, explain him like, okay, we have to deliver this. I know will be really hard to do it, so I need you have to manage to do this part. And normally, if I explain the situation, he will support me and he will understand the situation and work for that. If I'm managing a junior team, that's where I make a lot of tasks, small tasks, and I just give one after the other. I'm sure, because you know, it also depends of the if I know the developers for so long, of if they are new. So the worst scenario is a new developer, a new junior developer. That's when I have to give task by task, and also I have to validate if the time that I assign for each task is correct. So I'm trying to answer into your question.
No, thank you, Pedro. I mean, you answered it. You've obviously had ordered it, and obviously depending on the type of developer you've effectively been assigned.
Yeah.
I suppose even that's driven by budget to an extent. Really depends on your interaction and let's face it, what you're going to expect to actually come as an output. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Wisen, did you have something that you wanted to add there?
Not really. I think I was raising my hand to the first opening question.
Okay. I'm happy to go down that route as well if you're happy to share your story at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if there are no other questions for Pedro, I'm happy to share my story. Yeah, I guess to set the context here is this story is when I was not actually on a CTO role, but I was more responsible on shaping the team up and making sure that we can actually deliver what we are promising to our client. And I think, like, if you think about limited resources, I think in that particular project in mind, that was like probably a couple of years ago, because I was responsible to actually design the team shape. Typically, when you start the project, I was like, yeah, let's make sure that we got one senior developer and one maybe mid-level developer. But because I was not actually responsible on the hiring, what I got instead is actually one fresh graduate. So this is one fresh graduate as compared to like two developers that I was actually asking for. And I guess obviously my confidence was plummeting by that point because we promised so much to actually deliver. And this is the only resources that we were actually given, the people, I guess. And this fresh grad in particular, I think he just got out from the boot camp and he doesn't actually have any real experience at all. So this is like the first time he got into a project. I guess the moment I got through it is, I guess one of the idea that pops in my head by that point is the idea of shoe sizing. And I think what I did there is I kind of took the idea to the extreme. So if you've not heard about the idea before, the idea of shoe sizing is coming from the idea of how you would buy shoes for a child, and typically for kids, their feet will grow really quickly, right? So if you get a shoe that is too small for them, they'll be in pain. If you get something that is just at the right size for them, they will outgrow it very quickly. If you get something that's too big for them, they might not even be able to walk, right? They might just fall down. So at that point, I guess, like as per what Pedro mentioned, I guess in my head, when I get like a fresh grad, my immediate thought there at that point is like, yeah, maybe I should break this task down further. But I try a different approach. I'm not saying that this approach will work for everyone, but I guess maybe I just got lucky there. I took it to the extreme where I just give him a really big shoes, like take a really big responsibility, I actually asked him to make a big decision on the infrastructure, like decide on where they want to go next. I will give you all of the guidance you need, all of the network, all of the people that maybe you can talk to, all of the training that you can get, anything that you want, but you have got to be accountable for this and just responsible for this. And to my surprise, he was like really holding himself accountable for it. I think he showed the sign of like he's tumbling over, but I can see that he's just like constantly just owning this work by himself. And I was just so amazed of what he's able to pick up in that short period of time. And that was really helping on how we completed the delivery on the first couple of months, I think, because that's just the amount of people that we've got to at that point.
Cool. Thanks, Wisen. Thanks for sharing your story there. I think I said at the beginning, but just in case anybody missed it, if anyone wants to be in a breakout room when we do that with anyone in particular, so if you've got any questions for Pedro or for Wisen, then just let me know. Send me a direct message through this, and I can make that happen. But I'll move on then to the next question. So the next question was actually before the event. So this is from a London CTOs member, Corley. I don't know if he's online or not. Couldn't see him on there, so it could be for a recording afterwards. But he currently works as a CTO for Drygrow, an ag tech startup based in central London. He's been doing that for about 4 years. So he was curious to hear how more experienced tech leaders approached working with contractors. I think he said it can be hit and miss, and wanted to know if anyone had advice or a framework for managing contractors to ensure they provide the goods on time and on budget, particularly when they have more expertise on the topic than your team do. Any thoughts on managing contractors? Yeah, Ross.
Yeah, again, it's depending on what type of contractors are involved, but if it's sort of independent contractors versus agencies supplying contractors, I think there are the subtle differences. But I've always felt that a contractor, if you're bringing them in to do something very specific, then that will be clearly defined up front, and the expectations are much clearer. Those aren't the kind of contractors you get very often. More often than not, you're getting people in to fill in a gap in your team or to scale quickly. And if that's the case, then why are you treating them any differently to the permanent employees that you're also bringing in? You know, yes, you don't want to disenfranchise your permanent people, but you should be applying the same kind of processes, making sure you've got the right kind of quality of people that you need, the culture fit is right. If they're going to be part of the team for a while, then you can't compromise on any of those sorts of things. I've always had a bit of a distinction if you're bringing in people from an agency, i.e. you're taking a whole team or a subset of a team. You know, you expect them to work well together, so you give them a little bit more leeway, but ultimately you're still applying your same sort of principles as to what you'd expect from your permanent people as you would from a contractor, to make sure that they're actually delivering what you'd expect.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Ross. Richard, did you have something to add there?
Possibly, yes. And this is going to be a bit of a dirty way of answering because I am actually a contractor. So just obviously from the other side. So whether do you hire a contractor as a person? Do you hire a contractor as almost a service? And probably just go into more what Ross was saying there. If you're bringing a contractor in to fill a gap in your team, that's not traditionally why you generally bring a contractor. You generally bring a contractor because you know they're going to bring you a service or something, and what you ultimately want there is obviously a contractor that's delivery oriented. So if you are looking for a contractor, probably best thing is obviously always treat everybody with respect, but they are an external entity. They're not really staff, and you know, as I say, just treat them as such. Treat them as an external company that you're holding to account to deliver something, even though it's on a time and material basis, and probably have some sort of statement of work in place to obviously set the expectations of what you're actually expecting. But that's my take on. As I say, I'm a bit of from the other side there. I say I am a contractor. I have hired contractors before as well when I've been on various engagements. Same thing applies. You know, yeah, I want somebody who can work within the culture of either the rest of the team that I'm setting up or the clients that we're actually doing the work for. But ultimately, they are externals in their own right. They have SOWs and they're held to account for their delivery, and I expect delivery-focused people. I know some people try to take on contractors for more BAU style work. I'm not sure the contractor model necessarily works for that, but you know, I can put my hands up. I don't generally do BAU work, but some people here may have had good experience taking contractors on for BAU. I just wanted to
respond to that because I agree with everything that you're saying in terms of how you treat a contractor, but I'd equally say that's how you should be treating your permanent staff as well. And that's where actually the differences in how you manage them should be negligible. Yes, absolutely, you bring in contractors to do specific tasks, and particularly with all the IR35 changes of focus between the different types, I can clearly understand why you're saying what you're saying, but clearly there's a mix of people who end up contracting at organizations for 3, 4, 5 years sometimes. Ultimately, everyone on your team should have a clear vision of what they're there to do, i.e. a statement of work, be treated with respect, and all of those sorts of things. I think the difference in how you manage them, how you select them, should be negligible.
From that point of view, obviously also not knowing how the background where you normally work, obviously, yeah, I'd agree. If you normally do only delivery focused, then yeah, you're going to want delivery focused people, whether they're permanent or contractors. But I suppose it's the other end of it. You can't necessarily go and sack a permanent person for not necessarily delivering against a set of objectives. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Whereby with a contractor, I'd expect that if they weren't delivering what they should be delivering, then you wouldn't be paying, or you wouldn't be you know, taking that contractor on any longer. And I think there's that management of when a contractor via permie isn't delivering, and how you manage that. Go on, Barry.
Oh, that's good. We're coming up about time on the question, so so I just wanted to move on to the next one. Again, anyone else that's got anything to talk about with Richard or Ross there, then just let me know. Okay, so the next question that we had, this is from another one of our members who's an experienced CTO, is about to start a new role with a company at an early stage of their growth. He said that the budgets and expenditure will be more restrictive than in previous roles, but there's going to be as much to be done as before. So I was keen to hear how others have managed this kind of thing in early stage companies. Anyone with experience of this kind of thing in early stage companies? Anyone? Yeah, go ahead. Wisen, do you want to kick off, and then Richard, go over to yourself?
Just started my journey in a early stage startup. I just thought that maybe it's too obvious, but especially that you're a CTO, you'll be responsible and accountable for the technical vision. And I guess one thing that's quite obvious there is you could pick technologies carefully, especially pick something that is probably simpler, or especially when the budget is restricted. I think there are many technologies out there that will allow you to have a pay-as-you-go kind of billing model, and that's always useful when, like, if you don't get any traffic in the first month, you don't actually pay for anything, for example. I guess carefully choosing a technology that are simple, but at the same time, when they have a pay-as-you-go billing model, they will actually be quite helpful for the limited budget.
Great, thank you very much. And Richard, did you have some thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, probably just almost an extension actually of what's just been said. So probably just to set the scene without any NDA infringement. I was doing this last year with a startup bank. So they were looking to become a new bank. They weren't quite sure what their funding was going to look like, but they didn't really have the sort of money for the sort of things they actually wanted. And it was just trying to get the mix with that client. So it's a case of, when do you want various services to go live, and let's just try and focus on those. So it's almost trying to Moscow it again, but almost from a, well, you know, if somebody wants a bag of sweets and a packet of crisps, but they've only got 20p, well, you can only have one or the other. But with the hope that you'll be able to sequence that forward. So it's almost setting yourself up for that sequence going forward. And obviously coming back to using simpler technology. I had a case with, and this was this particular client. They wanted to do online banking, but for £100,000, which is about 5 times less than you can do it for an absolute minimum. And it did mean trying to effectively build something in, I won't go into the platform, but because of it, NDA, but effectively building something with a view of replacing it later on. So, and I'm from an architecture background, so obviously that sounds really crap to me, but sometimes you have to start somewhere, and it might not be the most ideal thing, and it might not be the thing that carries you forward permanently, but it's something that gets you moving now as a startup, with the hope that you continue in business, money keeps coming in, and you have a long-term strategy plan to obviously migrate those services out to something better. That's all I've got to add.
Brilliant, thanks, Richard. Anybody else? Josh, I can see your hand up there, but I didn't know if you were waving or are you jumping in?
I'm jumping in, yeah.
Okay.
I was just going to add to both those points. Actually, I'm a first-time CTO of a very small startup currently. Hopefully, will grow. But on the point around kind of technology and choosing technology, and I kind of think that the point I'd like to make is pick your battles. So Wisen said about kind of choose things which you're familiar with and stuff like that, but also know when it's okay to spend a bit of money rather than trying to roll your own or build something yourself. So, for example, our biggest infrastructure cost is we use Gem Fury for hosting all our private packages internally. Now that costs us about $200 a month or something, which feels like that's more than the rest of our AWS bill because we're using serverless. So I always, when I see that bill come out, I think, oh God, that's a real rip-off. We could just host this ourselves on EC2. But the developer time and effort to make a service like that stable and responsive and reliable enough is worth more to you than it is your effort of, the effort of building that is a lot greater than the $200 that you'll put into just paying for a service. So it's about knowing when you can just say, all right, fine, we're not going to bother fighting that battle. I'm happy just to, kind of offload that elsewhere so we can focus on building what we need to build. That would be my input on that. You don't have to try to build everything, basically. Know when you can defer that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Josh. Anybody else with anything at all that they want to add on this point before I'll move on?
Barry, you've muted.
Barry, you're mute.
That's the most common thing I think we've heard on these calls, unfortunately. Sorry about that. So the last question before we move on then is, to what level of exploration and evidence would an experienced CTO set as a threshold for moving forward with type 1 big technical decisions within a project? Any thoughts on that?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, and I'll pop it in the notes as well. What level of exploration and evidence would an experienced CTO set as a threshold for moving forward with type 1 big technical decisions within a project?
Stupid question. What is the type 1 big technical decision?
I actually researched this as well because it was a new one to me, and I saw it something that Jeff Bezos had spoken about, with type 1 decisions are not reversible and you have to be very careful making them.
Yeah, so I'm similar with these sorts of things, generally working in a financial background. And that's generally, banks are generally quite good at dealing with this because they have governance in place to work these things through. And you are expected to research all these things and everything else. But what I find with some CTOs and CIOs is that they'll generally just try and buy big instead and hope that they'll mitigate anything that may come across in the future. I'm, as I probably alluded to before, I'm more from an architectural background, so I can actually generally work these things through. But it's a difficult one, because what you don't want to do in terms of, you know, really, really big decisions is effectively try and boil the ocean to a point whereby it's going to it's all budget consuming. You're never going to get your board or your CEO or the rest of the C levels back in on these things. So there are things that are obviously always going to be structural, and I think probably if you're in a company which is more technology focused, selling, I suppose it's more platform infrastructure style things, not from a, you know, servers and databases point of view, but more from a system point of view. These are like your foundational things. Try and sell that to board or anything else without having a longer term strategy. You're basically going to have people staring back at you and going, well, that's not very sexy, I'm not going to fund that, especially your CFO. So if you are looking at these sort of foundation massive purchases, I would say generally you need to have a much longer term strategy and fit it in. It's much easier to get the sort of funding for things that are more customer focused, so things where your customers are going to have more direct benefit. But I know that sounded like waffle, and I apologise. I was just trying to add some context there. I've been in those situations, but they're all different. Having a more, I've gone very specific in those situations. I haven't got a more general approach, if that makes sense.
Great, thanks, Richard. Dan, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to admit, I've never heard of a type 1 decision before either. And I mean, in technology, I'm of the mindset that there really aren't that many completely irreversible decisions that are that critical. You know, you can choose whether you're, I don't know, developing on Unix or Linux or Microsoft. You can choose whether you're building a mobile app or a mobile website, whether you're developing with one platform or another, messaging, microservices or monolith, all these sorts of things. None of that is irreversible. Like, there are always ways to migrate these sorts of things later on if you find that you need to scale differently, or you need to pivot your company, or all these sorts of things. So I'm kind of at a loss in some ways as to what the issue is here. More pertinent to me is just getting something out and getting it delivered that can start showing useful features and useful services to people, so that the sales teams can get out there and start talking to people and things like that. I mean, you know, the rest of it is just trying to get a job done and get something delivered quickly, I think. So it's a strange question to me, I have to admit.
Yes, Ross, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I completely agree with Dan. It's like, well, it boils down to risk, I'd say. If you're having to make a decision and the risks of making the wrong decision are still high, then you haven't got enough information to be making that decision. So therefore, how do you start making those smaller, iterative, less risky steps to get closer to making that decision that doesn't involve that risk? And that's what you've got to try and work out.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Yeah, Angelos, do you have something you wanted to add there?
Yeah, just I agree with Dan and Ross here. I think the thing that is irreversible is your investment into people. That's the most difficult thing to actually change. So I would say think carefully, mostly how you build the team around the technology, rather than technology itself. Technologies do change, but yeah, it's difficult to, if you invest into hiring a team of 50, for example, on a Java stack or something like that, and then you realize that you need to change something, it's pretty tough to make a change from that.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I'll move on. We've had one more question that's come in then. And the question was, does anyone have experience selling software as a service to enterprises whilst building on a budget, i.e. managing slow sale enterprise procurement cycles on a tight runway? Anyone with anything to add on that? No experience here. Maybe that's something for another event then, that we can.
Yeah, I know of a business that's had these challenges, and they talk to me quite regularly. I'm just not quite sure how much I could actually offer on as an answer to the question. But again, back in the financial industry, one of the things that obviously everybody goes through an RFP process when they look to buy new services and systems. So if a bank is looking to buy a service or system from or for their estate, and they've got a group of vendors, they go through an RFP process, and the scoring normally contains things like how established is that business and various other things. So if you're a startup and you're trying to sell into a financial industry, or the financial industry, it can be quite tough, but it's not impossible. But in terms of actual payment turnarounds, I mean, by law, it's 60 days unless there's another unless there's an agreement within the EU anyway. So if you make sure that you align your milestones to your payment requirements, and that make sure that you allow for 60 days, then providing that your reporting method to the client on that the basis that you've achieved a milestone, then it's generally okay. It's just being really careful with how you're managing the client's expectations to make sure that you've got the cash flow coming in. But as I say, I'm talking on behalf of another business and usually been on the other side of the fence on that one.
It's Freddie here. I can maybe share my experience in my previous role. I was working for a startup going through scale up and trying to offer enterprise solutions for fintech companies like tier 1 banks. And I can tell you it's really, really, really tough, right? And it's probably the worst combination, one being a big monolith enterprise that has got great legacy and they have no idea how to deal with you. And on the other hand, you have a startup that has got limited resources and being subject to their bureaucracy and being subject to demands from them that you are in no position to fight. So it was tough. And part of the reasons why I'm no longer with them was because they ran out of money, right? But what they did was, fortunately, being a startup that's been around for 10 years, they do have a legacy product that is well entrenched in the market. So the thing that was catching them up was the new product that they were building. So what they had to do was for now to temporarily downsize to just focusing on their core product and continue and now they're better prepared to deal with sort of those tier 1 banks, because you need a long runway to get there. And that's where it is really important to find that balance. And I think you need to have experienced people from both sides, both the startup and the big companies that you work for, to really navigate through this properly. Otherwise, as I say, it's just the perfect storm, yeah, the worst combination.
Great, thanks Freddie, and thanks everyone. Anybody else with any experience in this space that wanted to share it, or in fact any questions at all that you wanted to throw out to the rest of the group before we go on to the breakout rooms? No, nothing yet. No, okay, cool. Oh, go on.
Hi, it's Jeremy speaking. I have a question, if I can, if I may.
Of course, yeah.
So I cannot put my video because Zoom keeps crashing on me. So we'll do with the sound. If you can hear me, it's a good thing. So like I asked in the chat, I would be really keen to get a story from a CTO tech lead in a product company who had to deliver with very limited seed funding and competing with companies which are well more funded. How do you manage this? I had a lot of very interesting replies in the chat, but if I could get one or two stories, it would be really helpful. I think Pedro was offering to give something if you're here.
Yeah, I mean, I can share now. There's several stories I can share now. I can contact you later and explain, because I have like 3-4 projects with pretty limited budget. Barry, as you like to do, I can do it now, or we can have a private room later. I don't know, Barry, what you recommend?
We're going coming up to about 40 minutes. Do you know what I'll do? I'll set up I'll do the breakout rooms now, and I'll make sure that yourself and Jeremy are in the same room, so you can talk about that.
Okay.
Okay, makes sense.
So what happens here? I don't know if you've been in these breakout rooms before. They're pretty cool. It'll just Zoom does it all automatically and sort of puts you in with other people. So generally we find about 70–80% of people stick around. Some people obviously that might have to go can go. So yeah, you're welcome to stay, you're welcome to go. I'll sit in the main lobby, so please stop and say goodbye on the way out and leave any feedback. But no, I hope you've had it. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've taken something from this. We're really keen to hear any feedback that you've got. So we'll be sending out a feedback form shortly, and how you want to progress. So any particular events that we can build this around. There's an incredible amount of CTOs in various communities that we're involved with. So yeah, anything in particular, then let us know. But with that, I'll press the breakout rooms button, and so you'll all magically disappear into different places. And yeah, I'll see you soon.